Hello, everybody. We have a panel discussion we're going to be doing. Want to introduce my panel. We need to switch up a mic here because we only have 4 mics. So I'm going to start out with Mike Tripodi. Mike is with Evergreen Trading, which is connected with Horizon Media, one of the largest media buying agencies in the world. And he oversees their digital marketing and purchasing.
Yep.
And then I have Angela Salk, who was formerly with Group M, running all their digital analytics. Group M is, again, one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world. And she recently left and is taking a little time off, but is an expert in the world of and worked with P&G. But I'll let her give it. And then we have Gil from Bliss. And Gil, Bliss is like a marketing company that does geo-targeted marketing, and he is the chairman of the North America.
Chairman's, VP, but
VP.
you can say chairman.
Chairman.
That works.
And Gil is one of the experts. So thank you guys all for joining us today. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with geo-targeted marketing and what that means. And I've been in advertising 25 years. As we all know, there's been a revolution in advertising in terms of digital and the data that's being provided. People typically on their laptops, and now with your cell phones, people don't realize how much data is coming off of this, and how much you're being followed, and how much data people know about you, and how you as a marketer can tap into that data to drive your sales directly. So we want to really get into, kind of with some experts, how you can tap into geo-targeted marketing to really drive sales and drive direct sales at the last point of purchase. And with these experts here, we're gonna go through. I'm gonna have them each kind of give a little rundown on who they are, their history, more than what I just said. So I'm gonna start out with Mike. Mike, why don't you give me a...
So I'm Mike Tripodi. I've been in media for about 18 years. Actually started out in the media department of DDB Needham before OMD was formed, so pretty far back. And I've worked in all the holding companies, really, from Omnicom to Publicis. And for the past 11 months, I've been working with Evergreen Trading, which, like Keo said, is a privately owned corporate trading firm that works in partnership with Horizon Media.
And you, before that, were working on Fios, right?
Yep, so I led at VM1, part of Zenith, led the Fios digital team. So obviously heavy local and geo-targeting everything we could possibly, any kind of
Fios.
data stream to get to a household that we could tap into.
There we go.
Yeah.
Angela, maybe?
I'm Angela Salk. I, for the last 8 years, have been with WPP, and for most recently running all of our global social partnerships. So every time we actually did a partnership with a social partner, there was data associated with that partner, and I would actually help negotiate what data we needed and how to actually create solutions and value adds for our clients. I came over to the agency, or the dark side of things, later in my career. I spent the first 11 years of my career actually on the client side, splitting my time between the Avayas, the Lucents, and the Calvin Kleins of the world. So there's no rhyme or reason to where I've been or the clients that I've served. So I span quite a bit of capability there.
My name is Gil Larson. I'm the VP of North American Sales for Bliss. I joined just about, next month it'll be a year. So just under a year ago I joined to help launch the Bliss brand and build the business here in the U.S. Bliss is a London-based geolocation mobile platform, which we'll talk about, and a big business in EMEA, a big business in APAC, but new to the U.S. market. So, happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you guys all for being here. Does everybody take out their cell phone right now? I don't know if you have every other cell phone with them. Take it out. When you're searching for something, and we're going to talk about the path to purchase, but I think it now starts ultimately with your phone, and a lot of times ends with you looking at your phone and comparing things. But if you were on here and you were in New York, if you were looking for what's New York known for, if you want to go find some food, Pizza. Pizza? I hear pizza. So if we went on, typically what you're going to do, you're going to go on your phone, you're going to look on here, you're going to type in pizza where? In the Google, in your Safari or Google Maps or your Maps or in Yelp. But I think that is so important in terms of what you're doing and what you're understanding how people are going about the point of purchase, which is much different than it used to be before. Once they get to a store or a restaurant, or if they're going someplace, they're comparing too. They're comparing like what people ordered before, comparing a product that they see, a pair of shoes, they're going to go online and see if they can get it cheaper on Amazon or down the street. And that's because they have this cell phone sitting there. What you don't realize is that with all these apps, you're being followed. And I want to kind of start off with, really Gil, but all of you guys can answer this, but I'll start with Gil. What kind of data is being collected, and where is, what are people? So, because I don't think people really understand.
Tell him, Gil.
Just start with the softball.
Yes, right? Cell phone.
Yeah. So the compliance is a big thing, right?
Yep.
So just to start out, Bliss, and not only Bliss, but I don't want to speak for every company, but most companies that are collecting mobile location data, there's no personally identifiable information that comes along with that. It's all device IDs. And in terms of targeting device IDs, it's segments of device IDs. It's not on a one-to-one basis. So nobody is going to specifically target your device individually. It's basically clusters and segments of device IDs that make sense for the brand, whether it's where you are in real time or where you've been. So if you have your location services enabled, which most people do, because if you want to use any kind of utility apps, Waze, weather, right, they need to know your current location. And in the app world, which lists 95% of the advertisements that we serve and the data that we collect is from in-app, you have to opt into, when you download an app for the first time, to get prompted, can we share your location? So you have two opt-ins. Additionally to that, there is do not track and limit ad tracking that you can also choose as well. So the only way you're being able to be targeted via location data is if you have basically double opted in and not opted out on top of that. So, and again, there's no personally identifiable information that's transferred. So compliance is a big thing. And at Bliss, I know so based in London, part of the EU, at least for the next 2 years. But right now, the next big thing for compliance in the EU is the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation that's going to come out a year from now. And that is, the EU traditionally has been a little bit stricter than the US in terms of data protection. So I know at Bliss, we comply with the highest standards of that. And by default, by being part of the EU and complying with their standards and practices, that's something that we take obviously very seriously.
Cool. Yeah, data-wise, I know, Angela, you were, I don't know, say the data queen, but I think there's a lot of different sources that are coming from. So I don't know if maybe you can give everybody here kind of an idea where those data sources are coming from and how people, how somebody like a major agency like.
Or a client would think about using it, right?
Yeah.
So, we are totally inundated with data, and 99% of the time we're like, what the hell are we supposed to do with all of this? So when we would partner, because I've actually worked with Bliss out of the EU quite extensively in other location-based companies, but the thing that was always most important when you're looking at location-based is how do I actually connect this to the sale itself? So whether you're a client and you have your first-party data, or you have the ability to leverage somebody's third-party sales data, being able to say, okay, when we target this person, because they're in proximity to X and they got served ad Y, we are able to actually come back and say, here is what it resulted in. So I don't really want to go into the sources as much as the capabilities and how to think about utilizing the data a little bit more. And I think what happens in our worlds is that we get so excited about things and we just sometimes forget to ground it in the basics of sales, brand impact or, a brand measurement itself. So when I think about the successful campaigns and where we've had the most traction and utilization of geolocation-based targeting, it's all when we're able to actually literally tie it to a result of something, whether it be, and we're in the U.S., so I'll use, and I don't know if anybody here is in the auto industry at all, but that's a really key one for using geolocation based, because when you think about the auto industry, the ads that get put on television that you see normally come from tier 1 and tier 2s. It's actually the dealers that are putting those ads on television. So if you can geofence somebody and know that your competitor is actually at the Audi dealership, but you're really Mercedes, and you have the ability to, anybody who geofences within your competitive set, drive a message to them to bring them around to your dealership or messaging, is really where I see a benefit.
Explain geofence, because I'm not sure if everybody understands what geofencing. And I think there, a lot of people may, but it's probably help.
Okay, you want to do it from the, you can do it from the technical. Just so I'll
Technical
pass it back
side?
to you.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, geofencing is basically just setting up a radius around a specific point of interest, a specific location, and using the auto dealership.
It can be as big or small as you want,
as-
right?
It can be as
So,
big. It
It
could
could be a
Exactly.
stadium. It could be a
It could
city.
be it could be
Yes.
DMA level.
DMA.
It could be down to a
store.
A mile
you know,
or a
a
within
couple
100.
blocks.
Yeah,
That's right.
Exactly.
A couple blocks radius. So it's literally just establishing, where do you think your customers are going to come from? How far? What's the typical distance they would travel? So QSR is going to be a lot different than, let's say, automotive or retail.
Yep.
Anyway, you put the point, drop the pin in the map, and then you draw a radius out for however wide you want to set that geofence, in terms of whenever somebody comes into that geofence and they're in-app, they have their location services enabled, and they fit the targeting criteria that you're looking for, they can be served an ad.
Cool. Mike, I know, on your side, you've had some success over the years doing some campaigns, and
Yep.
especially when you were at FiOS. And maybe give some example of maybe something you've seen or one that you worked on that using the geo-targeted location-based.
Yeah, actually one of the partners that we talk with a lot right now is Alfonso TV.
Yeah.
And they specialize off of, and this is one of the things I really like about mobile, is how it kind of breathes new life into these other media channels. So out of home, which was something that was perhaps declining, is now seeing a nice boost from mobile. And in television, while not so much declining, but just a massive investment, now you can make that investment work even harder with something like an Alfonso TV campaign, which basically, if you marry it up to a television campaign, and it's listening to, it's actually, their servers are cataloging like all the ads that are going. But
Explain Alfonso TV, because I'm not sure if everybody knows Alfonso TV.
Yep.
First.
So basically, just it's a partner that can build campaigns for you based upon existing like television campaigns. So where you see the bulk of your investment, a small investment in a campaign like this will allow that larger investment to create a stronger, more efficient ROI. So it will listen to the advertising. So if you take, for example, like Walmart, and if you have some kind of, if you're Target, you're saying, all right, obviously that's my biggest competitor, and I want to build unique reach into my television plan, and I need to do it in these markets. So that's when we get down to the geofencing at like a DMA level. And then basically just the app will listen for, all right, exposure to, a Walmart ad and a non-exposure to a Target ad.
Yeah.
Now that is a unique competitive person to talk to. And ultimately, because it's tied to mobile, it tracks that to some kind of store visit.
Yeah.
And then in the long term, you can measure, a lift in visits in that market.
And then, the data sets that you're typically setting up, like if you're doing that kind of campaign, or if you're a QSR and you're trying to get lift in your sales, and you're looking at that, is it coming from like, do you go to like all this? I would think if I was like, Burger King, I want to target all the QSRs that are right around me, and then within a mile radius, and anybody who visited those, I can then serve ads to those people, right?
Yes.
And over the last 90 days, you went there, I can serve up an ad to you.
Yes.
That's how detailed you guys can go with Bliss or with.
You could go
other-
even more detailed, actually, and leverage, just to build on that example. So, you could use to create audiences. Anybody who engages with that brand on Twitter, if they have some sort of engagement with the brand, then you could say, okay, the people that not only follow Burger King, but the people that follow McDonald's and KFC and Taco Bell and all the others, you could actually create audiences off of those as well. And they'll be pretty large audiences. But what you're then doing is building out that capability to then, geofence them so that when that person or that cluster of people, because it's normally in the millions, comes into that radius, and we know that they, the last 4 times we know that they've had an engagement with a McDonald's, but they've come into a Burger King radius, you can actually target them. So you can use your competitive sets as well in really creative ways that you can get to these people. Because not all of us, and very few of us, have competitive sales data, how do you go and actually find other ways to target those competitors, those competitive brand and shoppers?
So it maybe get into some of the competitive data, which is interesting. Kind of, you can understand who your shopper is through this much better, much more detail, on a much more granular level. Really down to the specifics of how they shop and how they go to the purchase.
Yeah, I mean, location data can be used. Geofencing is obviously kind of the low-hanging fruit, but really, location data can be the foundation for an overall, and should be, in our opinion, foundation for an overall ad campaign. Mike spoke about how you can make your out-of-home a little bit smarter, right?
Yep.
In terms of knowing where people have been. I mean, the amount of data that is passed on your mobile device for each one of us in this room, there's over 100 data points that we're each passing, whether we know it or not, every day. Now, I don't go to 100 places. Think about all the space in between the places where you go. Take the train in, Grand Central, then I go to my office, then I'm going to lunch, right? All those data points are. So I think one of the core things that we've talked to a lot of brands about is really understanding consumer behavior. You think about all the insights that we've built sort of the digital economy around online, right? So we have this view into online behavior, digital behavior, clicks, impressions, views, right? Physical real-world behavior, it's usually a question mark, right? And so in order to capture a complete snapshot of who your consumer is, and not only who they are, but what's the right time to reach them, what's the right creative to reach them, what's the right moment where they're going to be most likely engaged, mobile location data can do that for you. And just to dovetail on that example, the QSR, let's say you're talking to, let's say we had a retail client recently. They wanted to target fitness enthusiasts. They had a video ad. Now, for those of you who get video ads on a 3G, 4G connection on your smartphone, just get me out of this thing, right? I mean, you're running around. I do not want to watch this video ad right now. But if we can see, okay, we know these people have been to SoulCycle. We know they've been to Barry's Boot Camp. We know they've been to a sports apparel, but we know they've been to Equinox. Not necessarily serve them the ad when they're there, but when they're back at home on their Wi-Fi connection, a little bit more lean back mode, maybe they've got a tablet, they've got a laptop, a little bit bigger screen,
Yep.
That's the right time to serve them the video ad, right? So it's not necessarily in that right moment when you see that device. It's understanding when's the right time, what's the right connection, what's the right device for you to really, because at the end of the day, it's all relevancy, right? The reason why location is important is because the more you know about somebody, the more relevant you can speak to them, and the more relevancy, the higher the likelihood is they're going to engage, right? So when can you capture the highest degree of relevancy for your brand to engage with those consumers?
Yeah. The half hour before lunch.
That's right. That's right.
Hugh, can I ask a question? Because something Gil and I were talking about earlier was, we talked about like data being, obviously it's incredibly important and it can differentiate partners from one another, but when you get down to like the people and the analytics behind that, how critical is that in the offering?
We talked about all the data, right? There's all this data out there. It's great. You can house it all on servers, but if you don't know what to do with the data, you don't know how to segment it, what to look for, how to break it down, and how to leverage it on behalf of your clients, it's just a bunch of data that's sitting there, right? So the research and the analytics is so key. And I know next to engineering, which is our biggest group, because location, while a lot of people talk about it, it's very difficult to do. Engineering is our biggest team. The second biggest team at Bliss is our research and analytics team, because being able to show that somebody saw your ad and went to a location is great. But then breaking it down even further, well, how many days did it take them to actually, for the time they saw the ad to when they went? How many days was that? What's the average distance they travel? What's the best day of week and best time of week to engage? What's the best store location based on the creative that you serve? So there's all kinds of in-depth, sort of informative insights that you can provide that not only will help you run a great campaign, on a mobile platform, but will really help inform your overall marketing campaign from the insights that you can glean off of location data.
And you guys serve your ads through like the thousands of apps you partner with, but there's also like social media and going through like a Facebook. And I'm not trying to take business, but Facebook is such a power we've talked about before in earlier things here. But
Yeah.
they're doing the geo targeting as well, so they're another place you can go. There's other social media apps that are doing the same kind of thing and providing that information. So I guess not throwing it to you because I know you're going to say Bliss is the side, but you got your professional opinion. Like, is it social apps? Is it doing something more with like with Bliss and the general apps? It's a combination of both, of course. I think they're probably the most powerful, but
Yeah. It's
but
Yeah.
is there something
I
What do
think
you
of it as
think?
an and.
Yes.
Right? So it's not an either or, it's
Right.
an and. You would be leveraging that technology in different ways based on if you were looking at a Facebook campaign versus a traditional, potentially getting somebody into a brick and mortar. So there's just different ways of leveraging and thinking about it.
And also just that communication is going to be in a
Totally
totally
different.
different place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether it is some kind of small banner, the little thumbnail, which we don't like to do, but sometimes we end up having to do.
Sometimes we have to.
And then there's the news feed within social media. That's just a very different experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah,
How you
definitely.
create what the creative that you're using and what you're trying to get
Yep.
across.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Most effective. You had mentioned a story that I know in Israel and
Yeah.
Korea and there's other areas around the world that are much more advanced in terms of just doing this kind of geo-targeting. And of course, mobile's bigger there. But you were mentioning a whole campaign you had done with a client in
Yeah.
Israel, I think.
Yes.
And I didn't say the client. But
No, can't say the client. But I'm going to,
Right.
so I like to tell things via case studies and via examples because it just brings it tangible to life. So I had a client that was looking to launch a new brand into a market. The market is Israel. And to understand the market is to know that they have a very high propensity to buy local brands. Right, so coming in as a challenger brand and a North America brand is going to be difficult. So we had to think about a unique way to bring the brand into the market to not just drive people to the store, but to drive people to the actual brand itself. So, and this is actually already a couple of years ago because they're so far advanced on the Israeli market in geofencing. We actually decided to partner with a very large-scale pharmacy. And what we ended up doing was using their sales data to help to determine who should be the audience that we should be looking at to try and bring them into this new product. And it was a femcare product, so it was an interesting purchase cycle. So, what we started to be able to look at was purchase cycles, and then we started to understand number of trips to the store and the possibility of how to think about the actual new brand opportunity. And what we started doing was we used geofencing, and there were so many opportunities that were embedded in this. I want you guys to understand that, number one, it was great because the store started to elevate their brand image. Even though the Israeli products, there was a propensity to buy them, foreign products had a better image and were seen as potentially better quality. So by geofencing and bringing people into the store, the actual store was working on their image. But at the same time, through this joint partnership, it was also not just to this drive to the store, but the actual product itself. So the product suddenly started to get a brand awareness in a new way through a store that was credible, that was now working on building their brand reputation and elevating their their equity. So what we were able to accomplish through geofencing, and it was actually, the pilot was done in Tel Aviv and then run throughout the country itself. But Tel Aviv is a very condensed market, similar to in New York, where there's a lot of walking. So you're able to set a pretty big geofence. And similar to if you were walking in New York City, you'd probably, over the course of a 10-minute walk, you would pass at least between 3 or 5 Dwayne Reeds, right? So what we were able to do with that, so I'm just equating it, I'm giving it, because I don't know, how many people understand the Israeli market. But what was great was that we were able to set a fence such that chances were that somebody on their 10-minute walk was absolutely going to hit the actual one of the stores themselves, and potentially actually more than one. So sometimes they actually got the message more than once. But what we were able to do was in a 6-month time frame, by drawing people into the store that had the credibility and to a product that they had never purchased before, we were able to actually gain 140% increase. Granted, we came from nothing, right? So 140% is great, but still within a 6-month period. And what we then learned was how to expand it into other areas where people were in the car versus walking and things like that. But it's such a great case study. The reason I love it is because sometimes our biggest ally can be somebody that we think is a challenge for us. So how do we think about an additional partner that we can leverage their data and the partnership of where the product might be sold to help to actually bring it all together to create that win-win? And that's why I love that case study so much. That was like one of my very first. It was probably
But
5 or 6 years ago.
I think you were saying it's now being used as a model.
It's being used everywhere. Yeah, we've rolled it out in South Africa. We've rolled
is
it
a
out
large-
in Turkey and all these other markets.
Consumer marketing company.
Yeah, exactly, for a very large consumer marketing company. And what they've done is use this as a model for how do you drive people not just to the store, but drive people to your brand within the store when you're a new brand itself.
Cool. I'd love to hear, some. I'm sure you have a bunch of case studies, but like, what's the best program you've ever done over the, And I know this is a short period that you guys have been doing this. I mean, this is very new technology.
Yeah. One of the most recent, we do a lot of retail foot traffic attribution through a combination of not only sourcing GPS and then kind of scaling it to nearby Wi-Fi, but also we partner with one of the largest beacon aggregators, so you get some in-store, because location's great to get somebody to a store, but oftentimes in a store they're either not connected to the Wi-Fi in the store, or they're just not in-app, right? So beacon data, when you have some scale, can be great. But one of the campaigns we did was for a retailer that was looking to drive to 10 specific stores in a handful of DMAs. And we did an A/B test control, and so for every 10 device IDs, we throw one out. That's the control, and then we have a test, and we could track, which device IDs have seen the ad based on, again, the targeting parameters and have gone to store. And we did the A/B test control. We saw that we drove a 76% store uplift between people who just went to the location versus people who saw the ad and went to the location. And it was right around the holidays, so it was a very tight window. And that is actually one of the catalysts for us recently launching a cost per visit model. So now we've run so many kind of retail foot traffic campaigns, not only in the US, but also internationally, that we're able to use predictive analytics and machine learnings to basically guarantee retail foot traffic so that brands only pay on a cost per visit basis. And so, while we all like to think we're spontaneous, there's a recent study that came out that said 93% of our behavior is predictive. And when you think about that, you're like, yeah.
Does anybody get up and they're going to work and it comes up on their phone 23 minutes to location? You're like, how does it know where I'm going? I don't know if that happens to your phones, but it happens to mine all the time. But yes.
So yeah, being able to understand that data and being able to predict where somebody is going to go and reach them again in the right moment with the right creative. Creative is such a big key too.
It is.
If you're going to utilize location, have that creative speak to the location. So we do a lot of dynamic creative. Weather triggers, day part targeting triggers are great.
Yeah, it's cold out. Free, coffee, discounted coffee.
So that's something that we encourage a lot, and we actually will help build for brands. because a lot of brands don't necessarily have 10 different pieces of different creative. But the more dynamic and customized the creative is to the location, typically the higher performance that we see.
Exactly.
So I know we're running out of time. I don't know where we're at, but I'd love to maybe there's questions out there and see what people have. I know some people.
Instead of something location, because my company doesn't have retail locations, but we sell in all the major like big box stores and stuff like that. People search, at home, I need a new printer.
Yep.
They always want to buy it because they want to touch it. So is there any way to sort of track? So they looked for this printer in this particular, type of printer in this price point. They walk into Staples. Okay, we have that stock. Let me serve you up. Hey, look, it's this one you were looking at earlier. You should buy it right now. Or, oh, we don't have this exact one, but we have one that's kind of like this. So is there a way to do it more in like a product as opposed to a...
There is. And I think
It can be
anybody
so-
here, I don't know who
Yeah.
wants to answer this. If you want to
So
build-
absolutely, there's a way to do it based on the product. It doesn't have to be to a retailer. It absolutely could be at a brand or a product level. You could even do it down to not just the product, but down to the product SKU if there was something you wanted to drive. But what you would have to do is, this is why we say that the data is so important. What I would suggest anyway, and you guys might suggest something different, which is the beauty of this is, if the majority of the, and I'm so sorry that I can't see you, so I'm gonna do this, but if the majority of work or homework or research is being done online, and you know where people are going to go and make those purchases, you can actually look at all of that historical and start to create segments and understanding of that. And by doing that, if you know that people go and search for X number through X number of stores, X number of brands, at each point in their research, you could put in something that actually drives back to you. And then if they're then going to a location, and you know that you can start to understand based on where people live versus where they shop, to your point, how large that geofence needs to be. When they get in proximity to the Staples or
Office
whatever it may
Depot.
be, you can prompt them back with the message for your brand that is almost like the reminder. It goes back to what you were saying on, it doesn't always have, we always make this assumption that right time, right message is in the moment. And it's not. Sometimes it's through the homework and then when they go to purchase. Does that answer it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect sense.
Cool.
Thank you.
You mentioned creative just a little bit, but as the tools for targeting are becoming more and more prolific on a regular basis, how do you get closer to the point at which the creative decisions are being made? Because often there's this conundrum, right? Which is, the tail's wagging the dog. Do we have the media plan first to impact the creative? Often the creative plan first, and you have to jam that in, right? So how are you guys making headway in connecting the plan to the creative at the local level?
I mean, at least from my perspective on the agency side, it's like really a constant struggle.
Yeah.
Literally going through this last week for a client they were asking, what assets do I need for your media plan? Then I'm sitting here like, what assets do you have? Like, what do you want to build?
Yeah.
I'll build a media plan for it. And we were talking earlier because one thing about, just to take it up from geofencing, to mobile overall, very rarely does a client have an actual mobile strategy that requires different messaging and all that. It's usually just an offshoot of an existing desktop campaign, which is,
Yep.
quite frankly, it's not fair to the mobile.
Probably backwards in this day and age.
Yeah,
You think
it
about how
is.
powerful and how much more time we're spending now on this
Yeah.
than we are even on anything else we do.
It requires this constant back and forth with your clients.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I just want to build on that because I 100% agree it's such a struggle. However, what you were talking about earlier, and that was things that we've been experimenting on, is dynamic creative. So creating like a toolkit of assets and using like historical can help you to start to understand the segments of which you could then go and create that toolkit. And based on the behaviors of those segments, you could serve it up. You can serve up creative that gets you a little closer. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But it gets you, I think too many times, and you know, coming from the media and ad industry, we like throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, all right, you know what, we did that, let's move on to something else. And there's so much we can learn from all of the historical, and we don't do a good enough job of doing our due diligence against that to help to create dynamic creative and make that toolkit more, you know, efficient.
Yeah, we were actually seeing so much demand for building. We just hired our second creative designer in New York,
Yeah.
because you know
People have a need.
it's a resource. It comes
Yeah.
down to a resource issue and a time. It does take time because you got to get obviously approvals, a whole round of approvals, and so on and so forth. But I mean, even the slightest customization, right? So there was a case study a couple of years ago at a former company that I worked at where it was for an automotive brand, and they did a study just running general creative, but it was still targeted. And then with those same targeting parameters, just calling out the specific city, not even getting, just saying, hey, Los Angeles, or hey, San Francisco, or hey, something really just basic. And just by calling out the city, engagement rates went up like, 2x.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be really, really, really sophisticated, although obviously that's the ideal scenario. But even getting a little bit customized, we find just drives higher results.
Giving a local flavor to it.
Giving a little bit of a local, like,
we're-
okay,
We're doing a campaign right now in San Antonio for QSR. Alamo is the most searched, and most visited area, but because the Alamo River, but everything. If you look on where people search the most, it's Alamo. So we're doing something off the Alamo just to make it a local feel for a national brand.
Consumers appreciate that because, my relatives and, they talk to me to say, hey, I saw this and I thought it was smart. And they appreciate when a brand kind of takes that
Takes
one
it,
extra
yeah.
step.
Yep.
That will affect their decision-making process.
Does.
Any other questions? Everybody else? Think we're good? Thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.